I decided to fly to my son's home without telling him, only to discover that my daughter-in-law was fighting for her life alone in the ICU. At the same time, my son was out driving around with some girls in the very car I had bought for him. I quietly called the police and reported the car as stolen. 2 days later, when he was finally released, he came back to me desperate and pleading, only to learn that I had already transferred everything into his wife's name for her protection. Hello, dear friends. Before I share the difficult path that brought me here, I kindly ask for a small favor. Please subscribe and tap the like button. It helps stories like this reach more people who may need them. And leave a comment with your state or city. It truly warms my heart to see where everyone is listening from and reminds me that none of us are alone. Thank you for being here. Take a deep breath, settle in, and let's begin. When I landed, the airport was full of noise, movement, and the smell of fresh coffee. But unlike most mothers visiting their children, I didn't feel joy or excitement. Deep inside, a cold, heavy worry had been growing, and it pushed me to act without my usual careful planning. I'm the kind of woman who organizes everything weeks ahead, but this time I dropped all responsibilities, grabbed the next ticket, and crossed half the country with no warning. I knew something was wrong, even if I couldn't explain how. In my tote bag were 2 jars of my homemade elderberry preserves, dark, tangy, and soothing. Sterling loved them when he was a boy growing up in Chicago. Beside the jars was a soft little teddy bear. It might have seemed silly since Veda, my daughter-in-law, wasn't expecting a baby, at least as far as I knew. But during our last call, her voice sounded weak and tired, and I wanted to bring her something gentle and comforting. Sometimes even adults need something small to hold on to. Stepping outside the terminal, I breathed in the warm southern air. It felt heavy compared to the crisp winds back home. The phone in my pocket stayed silent. I had tried calling Sterling for 3 days, hearing only endless rings with no reply. Veda hadn't answered in over a week. People always say a mother's heart can sense trouble. I never believed it until that fear settled deep inside me and refused to let go. The Uber ride to their home took about 40 minutes. When we pulled into their neighborhood, I looked out the window and saw a tall, solid building that seemed safe and quiet. Yet something in me remained unsettled, as if the walls themselves were hiding a story I wasn't ready to hear. The building was an old, beautifully maintained brick structure with tall ceilings and a roomy courtyard. A condo I had bought for them 3 years earlier so they could start their life with stability and avoid the financial struggles I once knew, but I now realized that comfort alone couldn't hold a family together. When I reached their door on the 3rd floor, it was slightly open, as if someone had rushed out, and the moment I stepped inside, a stale mix of old smoke and sour air hit me instead of the warm scent Veda used to fill the home with. Boots were scattered in the hallway, dishes and spoiled food were stacked in the kitchen, empty bottles sat on the counter, and a pile of unopened bills lay untouched beside a dusty box of Veda's prescribed medication, still sealed as if forgotten for months. A neighbor appeared behind me, an elderly woman who gently explained that she hadn't seen my son in days, but that an ambulance had taken Veda away 2 or 3 days earlier, unconscious and frighteningly thin. I barely remember leaving the apartment or getting into a cab. My mind repeated only one destination: City General Hospital. The ER buzzed with urgency, but all I cared about was finding her name, which appeared on the ICU list. There, after insisting they call the doctor, I met Dr. Dubois, who solemnly explained that Veda had severe pneumonia, dangerous dehydration, and signs of long-term exhaustion, and that she had likely been sick and alone for days. His words cut straight through me as I wondered where my son had been while she suffered, and all I could manage was a quiet request: "Please, may I see her?" She was in a medically induced coma, relying on a ventilator to breathe, and when I stepped into the room I felt my heart sink. Veda lay on the high hospital bed surrounded by tubes and wires, her face pale and thinner than I had ever seen. She had always been small, but now she looked fragile to the point of disappearing. This was more than an illness. This was the result of being left alone far too long. The air felt so heavy that I had to step outside before I lost control. Standing on the hospital steps, watching the city lights brighten for the evening, I couldn't believe that life outside continued as usual while she fought for hers inside. Then I saw a familiar SUV turn the corner. Midnight blue, polished, powerful. The one I had given Sterling for his birthday only weeks earlier. Loud music blasted from it, my son behind the wheel laughing with 2 young women leaning out the windows, completely unaware, or uncaring, that his wife was battling for her life just a few floors above. He didn't look toward the hospital once. Moments later, my phone buzzed with his message claiming he was by her side and begging me to pray for them. Staring at the screen, something inside me shifted. Not sadness, but a cold understanding that the boy I raised was gone, replaced by someone selfish and careless. I didn't call him back or waste breath on anger. Instead, with a calmness that frightened even me, I walked back into the quiet lobby, asked the receptionist for a cup of water and sat down. I took 10 minutes, not to rest but to accept the truth. The child I remembered, the one who once brought me drawings and promised to make me proud, no longer existed. In his place stood someone I barely recognized, someone who believed the world owed him everything. I took a sip of the water the receptionist gave me, warm and tasting faintly of plastic, and as I sat there, everything finally clicked into place. The car, that midnight blue SUV I had bought myself, chosen the features for, insured and thankfully registered in my own name. Sterling had complained at the time, asking if I didn't trust him, and I'd brushed it off with a joke about getting cheaper insurance as a senior. Little did I know that joke would become my saving grace. He treated that vehicle like a symbol of his status, but legally it belonged only to me, and the moment I saw him driving recklessly with other people while his wife fought for her life, my permission ended. Without hesitation, I pulled out my phone and calmly dialed 911 to report the car as stolen, giving my name, the plate number, and the direction I'd seen it heading. When asked if I knew the driver, I simply said no. I wasn't sure I even knew who my son was anymore, and added that he appeared to be driving under the influence and putting others at risk. When the dispatcher confirmed that an alert was being sent out, I ended the call with a steady hand. Still, reporting the car wasn't enough. I needed to protect what truly mattered. I searched my contacts and called my longtime friend and attorney, Odora, a woman I trusted with anything. As soon as she heard the tone in my voice, she shifted to full professionalism. I told her I needed documents prepared that very night. A deed transferring the condo not to Sterling but to Veda, along with a power of attorney giving me control over everything related to the property. After a moment of shocked silence, she agreed and told me to meet her in the morning. I stayed seated in the quiet lobby, staring at the ICU doors as minutes dragged by, imagining a patrol car stopping that SUV and wiping the smug expression off Sterling's face. Then my phone rang, a local number. A firm voice introduced himself as Officer Bradshaw and informed me that the vehicle had been stopped on Peachtree Street, with Sterling behind the wheel, acting aggressive and refusing to cooperate. In the background, I heard him shouting, insisting I would clear everything up. The officer asked if his claim was true, warning that confirming it would reduce everything to a minor citation. I inhaled the cold, sterile hospital air and imagined Vad lying unconscious behind the wall while Sterling partied somewhere, and with steady resolve I told the officer, "My son Sterling is in the ICU holding his dying wife's hand. The man you arrested is lying and hiding behind my name." After a brief pause, the officer confirmed they would proceed with full charges: grand theft auto, resisting arrest, fraud. And I ended the call watching my reflection in the dark window and barely recognizing the woman staring back. A woman finally ready for war. For the next 48 hours I practically lived in the hospital, arranging a private room, hiring a full-time nurse, and sitting beside Vad's fragile body as I held her limp hand and filled the silence with soft talk about autumn leaves and sweet potato pies, anything to keep death from slipping into the quiet. Meanwhile, my phone lit up again and again with calls from the jail. Sterling using his one phone call on me, certain I would swoop in and fix everything, but I let every call ring, listening only once to a voicemail where he ranted about the car, the keys, the mistake, the smell of the cell, yet never once mentioned Vad, never once asked if she was alive. In his mind she was still waiting at home like a silent, obedient shadow, when in truth she was suspended between life and death. When I went to their apartment to find her ID for the hospital transfer, the stale smell of betrayal greeted me. And while searching through drawers I found her old diary, pages filled with tight, trembling handwriting describing how Sterling drained her savings for status, how she endured unbearable tooth pain so he could buy a new shirt, how he screamed that the apartment was his and threatened to throw her out if she dared question him. As I read her words, the world dimmed around me. He had lied to her, crushed her spirit, and used my kindness as a weapon to keep her trapped, convinced she was nobody, that he wasn't just stealing her money. He was draining her dignity little by little, and when I read her diary entry about how he sold my grandmother's ring, claiming he lost it, only to buy himself a watch while telling her she didn't need jewelry because she just stayed home, something inside me burned hot enough to scorch the page. This wasn't simple selfishness. This was calculated psychological and financial cruelty, a slow destruction of her spirit to make himself feel taller. I took the diary with me not for court but for my own resolve, so that when he eventually looked at me with those wounded puppy eyes, I wouldn't forget the truth. Back at the hospital, I sat beside Vad again, holding her burning hand and whispering that she wasn't alone anymore, that I knew everything, and that he would never hurt her again. As dawn approached, I dozed off in the chair until I felt the slightest flutter against my palm. Her fingers twitched, her eyelids lifted, her eyes searched through the fog of fear, and when she finally focused on me, her first fragile words were, "Don't let him in." Terror tightened her grip as she whispered that Sterling had turned off the heat to save money, even while she lay sick and freezing, and when her pulse spiked, nurses rushed in while a cold, merciless resolve grew inside me. I walked out of the room transformed. I was no longer a mother but a judge, and the verdict had already been written. In the morning fog I headed straight to Odora's law office, feeling nothing but icy purpose, and when she slid the property deed across the table she also revealed something else. Sterling had recently applied for a shady payday loan, using forged documents with a fake version of my signature to mortgage the very apartment his wife was dying in. He hadn't been saving money for status. He'd been feeding his gambling habit and was ready to gamble away the roof over our heads. I picked up the pen and with each signature on the deed transferring the condo to Vad, I severed the last pieces of the past where my son still existed. Now there was nothing left for Sterling. No car, no apartment, no access to my money. I instructed Odora to file the registration immediately so the condo officially belonged to Veda, and she moved with precision, stamping the documents without hesitation. As for the SUV, I called the dealership myself, and the manager practically bowed over the phone when I gave the instructions. Tow it from the impound lot, send the documents and sell it immediately at wholesale price, with the proceeds going directly to the hospital charity fund for Veda's care. Within hours, the apartment and the sale of the car were processed. Sterling had been stripped of everything he treated as his own, left exposed and powerless. A moment later, a young woman called claiming to have been in the SUV with him. I calmly explained that he had no car, no business, no apartment, and that he lived off a wife and a retired mother. Her disbelief and frustration only confirmed my plan was working. Messages arrived from Sterling himself, demanding explanations, unaware that the apartment had been legally transferred, that the car had been sold, and that his reputation was crumbling in real time. Social media mocking him, friends realizing the truth, his own schemes collapsing around him. I put my phone down, satisfied. Checkmate. I left to wait for him at the hospital lobby, across from the elevators, book in hand but unread. I wasn't reading, I was waiting. 40 minutes later, the elevator doors opened and Sterling stepped out. Disheveled, wrinkled shirt, messy hair, dark shadows under his eyes, pathetic, powerless, and finally facing the consequences of the life he had thought he owned. He limped as he approached, a likely souvenir from his arrest or rough cellmates, yet still tried to carry himself with pride, scanning the room not for a doctor or his wife but for me. When he saw me sitting calmly, he stormed forward, face twisted in a grimace that was more tantrum than rage. "Mama, what did you do? Do you realize what you've done?" he barked, expecting the usual groveling apologies and handouts. I didn't move. I closed my book slowly, lifting my gaze to him, dry and unflinching. "Hello, Sterling," I said softly. "You smell. Go shower before you shout." He recoiled, dumbfounded, then erupted with indignation about the car, his pride and candy, only for me to calmly explain that the car was gone, sold to fund Veda's treatment. His eyes widened, disbelief flashing through them, and I continued, each word deliberate, cutting through his arrogance. He had no car, no job, no home, and the condo now belonged to Veda officially. His swagger evaporated. All that remained was a small, frightened man, grasping at illusions. He lunged toward the ICU, screaming at Vad to tell her, only to be met by a broad-shouldered security guard I had hired hours earlier. The guard blocked him silently, firm and immovable, warning that unauthorized entry was prohibited. Sterling struggled, shouting and insisting on his rights, but the guard pushed him back and the ward door slammed shut, leaving him stranded, humiliated and stripped of everything he considered his. Standing in the empty hallway, his face shifted from fury to a mask of suffering, a first step in the war that had only just begun. He would crawl, he would manipulate, he would lie, And even as he sniffled and edged toward me, I knew I was ready for whatever came next. Sterling's voice trembled as he called me Mama, begging like a frightened child, claiming the men he owed money to were going to kill him. Disgust was the only thing I felt as I led him into an empty hospital corridor, away from the patients. Under the flickering fluorescent light, he collapsed theatrically to his knees, grabbing my coat and sobbing about drunken mistakes, debts, and his supposed love for Vita, insisting the girls in the car were just colleagues. But all I saw was a parasite who had drained us for years. I ordered him to stand, and when he finally did, I showed him the stamped deed transferring the apartment to Vita alone. His eyes widened as he immediately calculated what he would gain if she died. I crushed that hope too, revealing my newly written will, leaving everything to an animal shelter. His fake remorse vanished, replaced by rage, threatening to contest it and call me senile. I showed him the psychiatrist's certificate proving otherwise and told him the apartment would have new locks and security that very night. Only then did he realize he had no home, no car, no money, no inheritance. Nothing. Whispering in genuine terror, he said the men he owed would kill him and begged for money to pay the debt, promising to disappear forever. "Just give me money," Sterling begged, but I cut him off. "No. You're a grown man. You brewed this tea, now drink it. Go work as a loader, a janitor, a courier. Oh wait, you'll lose your license. Then you'll walk." His expression twisted and he spat in my face, hissing, "You monster. You're not a mother. I hope you die with your Vita." I wiped my cheek calmly. "Feeling is mutual, son. Now leave. Security is coming." The guards appeared at the end of the hall and panic flashed in his eyes. "This isn't over," he screamed as he backed toward the stairs. "You'll regret this. The apartment is mine." Then he bolted, nearly knocking over a nurse. I felt no pity, only grief for the years wasted raising a weed. But I knew he wasn't running away. He was running there, to the apartment, desperate to grab anything before the locks changed. I called Eudora. "He's coming." She reassured me the locksmiths and police were already there. Relief washed through me, almost like freedom. Cutting off a rotten branch lets the tree breathe. Later Eudora described the scene. Sterling racing up the stairs, panting, frantically digging for his keys, only to find the apartment door wide open. 2 workers were inside, one drilling out the old lock, the other setting up a new alarm system. Eudora stood like a stone wall and 2 police officers leaned nearby, bored, the same ones who arrested him for theft. "What's going on? Get out. This is my apartment," he yelled. No one even flinched. Eudora lifted her eyes over her glasses and said, "Citizen Vance, leave the premises. You no longer reside here." He shrieked that he was registered there, that it was his mother's apartment, trying to force his way inside. Eudora simply handed him the documents. The transfer deed naming Vita as owner and the certificate showing he had been deregistered that very morning. Sterling went purple. His last illusion had just collapsed. "Without me. That's illegal. I'll file a complaint." Sterling tried to dash into the bedroom hoping for the safe, but an officer blocked his path. "Citizen, hold it," the sergeant said lazily but firmly. "You were told in plain English. This is someone else's property. You are nobody here." Sterling scrambled for his usual ace. "I have connections. I'm making a call." He feverishly dialed number after number, but no one wanted to stick their neck out for a man stripped of money, car, and status. Eudora and the police watched silently as he flailed, shouting about his stuff, demanding clothes, computer, TV, gaming console. Eudora nodded to a worker who packed a gym bag and 2 trash bags of his personal items and tossed them at Sterling's feet. "Take them and go. Everything else belongs to Vita." He stood staring at the pathetic bundles that now contained his entire life, seething. "You'll regret this," he hissed. "Citizen, exit," said the officer, hand on holster. He grabbed the bags, kicked one and tumbled out onto the stairwell. The door clicked shut behind him. The new lock sealed the final chapter. Outside, the evening wind chased leaves across the asphalt. Sterling, stripped of car, apartment, money and friends, tried the gold card he once flaunted. It was retained by the ATM. He slid down the wall onto the concrete, surrounded by his meager possessions, powerless, abandoned and utterly exposed. Meanwhile, I sat in the hospital watching Vad sleep peacefully, machines beeping calmly. The worst was over for her, but for Sterling, the hell he had built brick by brick, lie by lie, had only begun. 6 months passed. Autumn painted the city gold and crimson, but the cold was clean and invigorating. I sat on the balcony of the apartment, now smelling of thyme tea and oil paints, Vad wrapped in a warm blanket across from me, and the house, the life we fought to protect, finally felt safe in ours. She was still thin, and her movements carried the caution of someone who had survived a long illness. But the hunted emptiness in her eyes was gone. Life shone there. She was painting a watercolor landscape, the view from our window of the old park. "You know, Mom," she said, dipping her brush into water, "I started calling you Mom a month ago, and every time it warmed my soul. I found a job at the Central Library. They need a rare books restorer. The pay isn't huge, but it's enough, and the schedule is peaceful." "That's wonderful, darling," I smiled, sipping my tea. "But don't worry about money. We have a cushion." "I know," she said, setting down the brush, eyes serious. "But I want to do it myself. After everything, I need to know I'm not helpless." "You are the strongest girl I know," I said, covering her hand with mine. "We never spoke of Sterling." His name became taboo, as if saying it aloud could summon the evil back into our world. His shadow had vanished from this apartment along with the old wallpaper. The walls were now a warm peach, the furniture light. Even the memory of him had been scrubbed out. I sold my business up north, freeing myself from the logistics company I had built. I bought a small studio next door to be near Vader, not to interfere, letting her build her new life. We became a family, not bound by blood but by scars. "I'm going for a walk before sunset," I said. "Should I pick up those cinnamon buns you like?" "Yes, please. And some milk," she smiled. Outside, the air was crisp and invigorating. The simple pleasures of life, leaves rustling underfoot, children laughing in the park, filled me with peace I hadn't known in years. As I passed a car wash, I caught a glimpse of a familiar figure. Sterling, scrub brush in hand, soaked through, stooped, worn and exhausted. His eyes met mine across the street, and for a moment time froze. No anger, no pleading, just the fatigue of a man forced to earn his survival. He took a step forward, lips trembling as if to speak, but I didn't give him the chance. I passed him like a stranger, calm, unshaken. No pity, no gloating, just fact. Everyone gets what they deserve. He wanted a life of ease without effort. Now he worked dirty to survive. Balance was restored. My phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. "Ma, please, I can't take it anymore. I understand everything. Even just $10 for food, please." I stared at the words. Ma. The word that once held all the warmth in the world now felt empty. I had given him hundreds of chances. He had squandered them all. My finger hovered over the reply button. Endure it. God will provide. I selected block contact and deleted the chat. The last thread connecting me to that past snapped. I inhaled the autumn air deeply, smiled, and picked up my pace toward the bakery where the cinnamon rolls were waiting for my real daughter. I was expected at home. This is a story about love that can be blind, about an epiphany that sometimes costs too much. About how one woman found the strength to cut off her own flesh to save a stranger who became family. Was Oilia right? Was she cruel toward her son? Or did he cross a line beyond forgiveness when he turned off heating and denied medicine? A grown man must answer for his actions. Sometimes, love alone cannot save him. If you enjoyed this story, share your thoughts below and support the channel to bring more life stories. Subscribe for more tales of courage, redemption, and hard truths. See you in the next story with love and respect.